So I feel that this whole thing is like when you say you're at a crossroads, I look at it that I have 4 roads. It's not one road. Earlier I used to go only on one road, I go on a straight line. I didn't look left and right and side. But the very fact I'm put on that place, I see 4 roads around. Now I have to decide which road do I take and how do I maximize what I get. It gives me, I probably that's been my life also, because every time I am in a crisis, I like to see the roads around. And I just turn and twist and I'm back into operations. So that is where I see that it has a very significance for the communities. It has a significant role for NGOs. We have a lot to play at the policy level.
You would have been part of certain processes in the last 40 years, and which are mostly funded by some funding agency. So they tell you to organize, or you write a program and they support you, and the program goes on. Of course, there has been different kinds of organizations supported by foreign agencies or local organizations or government also. Their whole idea is project funding. So none of these organizations had a long-term vision. What do we do? We have been working with poor people, but we have not responded to the middle class. We never have any kind of activities to challenge the middle class, where many of the rural communities are moving to urban areas, city areas, and co-opted to a market economy in terms of consumerism. And today they are co-opted completely through an education system where their upbringing is towards like a labor, not a farm labor, a labor to service in the industry. And they call it as a white collar job, elitist work, a lot of money. So we are pushed into a career of a different kind of labor class. But they themselves don't understand how they are getting exploited. It is a very short term.
You rightly said people are not with us. Why are they not with us? Middle class is not with us. Why are they not with us? Why are we seen as disruptors, having negative? Why is Greenpeace, Amnesty, environmental, the Kudankulam people, they're all treated like criminals, sorry. All our best leaders, people's leaders are treated like criminals here. So what is going on? What is going on? So I think that we failed miserably in fighting in the structure, ideological battle. We did not clearly understand or shape our work. That's what I was saying. We were kept busy in doing grassroots level project work, when we should have been engaging with politics and with young people. We should have been in policy making and with young people, so that 20-30 years now we would have had masses, millions of people thinking the same things. So I would suggest that we have to locate ideological tools and use them. How many of us really, one generation of activists had liberation theology as their inspiration. What happened to that? Where did it go? Where did those values go? So that is the thing. So we lack ideological tools, and we have not recognized that the tools exist and we haven't used them. So therefore now having been not only engaged with the grassroots, but I also work increasingly with young people. I never miss a chance to go to any young group in college, in any village or anywhere, and I find that the young people's idealism continues to exist. That is our only hope. And if we engage with, say, 12-13-year-olds, in 10 years or 8 years, they will come into working, into very constructive work levels. So we need to target young children and work with them. And I would say also work with women, because their leadership and wisdom has been lost to generations. And I, as a person who always works with empowerment of women, I know that if you give them economic, in a sequence, you give them economic empowerment, so personal empowerment and then political empowerment, there will be structural change at a very fundamental level. So these are the strategies I am suggesting. NGOs, if they want to stay relevant, They cannot be led by funding agendas, and they cannot be seen to be in coalition with the churches as a strategy. I am not doing context analysis. I am giving very clear, suggestions which we need to think about what made us ineffective, and this is a very strong, considered view that I am presenting. And then finally, and most importantly, I think, which I need to say, is that we have not adequately marshaled ideological tools to actually present to the people the way one small book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, drove an entire movement for 30 years. We don't have that tool. Please, I would recommend strongly that you consider reading De-Brahmanizing History and try to apply that, because we need to work on ideological input which is justice, rights and constitutional value based. We cannot be seen as anything other than that. And any kind of structural, connections which we are making with any of the existing bodies it's not going to work. So I don't think we should be thinking about NGOs now. We should be thinking about our country, about its population, and about how we as individuals and groups can make a difference in the next generation. We cannot anymore be thinking about funding organizations, pleasing the church, or any funding. I would say don't take funding at all. Finished, sir. I have finished. That's yeah. Shall I make my last closing remark? We need to focus on livelihoods, food production, water use, housing options, and local governance systems. We need to strengthen. So we need to focus on that, and then we need to focus on two groups. That is, women in the local levels and young people at the local levels. And unless we equip ourselves and think in those lines, it's very difficult for us to continue to be relevant as people who have been social activists so long.
We NGOs, CSOs, are supposed to be the reflection of the society. What is the evils, ills of the society, good things and bad things of the society? We are supposed to reflect. So when we say the NGOs and CSOs and Crossroads, I would like to remind us that the whole society is at crossroads.
If there is poverty in the society, NGOs and CSOs are also supposed to be in poverty. If there is untouchability in the society, NGOs and CSOs are also supposed to be untouchables. Similarly, if there is oppression in society, NGOs and CSOs are also being oppressed. And if there is division in the society, NGOs and CSOs are also being divided. That is the first parameter I want to place. The second problem is that the crossroads are just not in one particular area. We are at crossroads. Socio-politically, there is a socio-political crossroad. There is a legal and administrative crossroad. There is isolation crossroad. The resource crunch is a crossroad. And change areas are also at crossroads. So we are at many crossroads, not just one crossroad of, I think we talked about resource crunch and a few areas and all. Very good. They are all part of this discussion. Now, I would like to simply remind us of one thing, to say that the first crossroad that we are in now, as pointed out both by Stanley and Cynthia, that we are at philosophical crossroads. Ideologically, we are at crossroads. Earlier on, 40 years ago, we began in good earnest about left orientation, about Marx and Lenin. When we began in Bangalore with various study groups and all that, when I went to Tamil Nadu, to a tribal rural situation, then I had to take up Periyar. I had to take up Thuvika. I have to talk about Vallala. The various philosophical backgrounds with which communities are being forced to move in certain directions. So when we are at crossroads, we have to take a direction. If there are 4 roads, lanes, we've got to take only one lane. Unfortunately, we seem to have been taking several lanes at the same time and getting into a quagmire. We are not able to come out of that. It's quicksandish. We got caught. That is exactly what is happening in the last 20 years. So there is a way in which we need to look for alternatives in terms of whether it is funding, whether it is programming, whether it's a way we act in the community, in society. I think we need to look for alternatives. And without finding the right alternative, we seem to be dabbling in many other areas. Exhaustive discussion through Stanley and Cynthia is on funding and how to get out of this crossroad. That's exactly where we have to really moving ahead, and therefore we certainly come to a place where the ideological and philosophic crossroads have to be crossed first, and then the programmatic. And only when you start a new program, a new programmatic direction, can we think of funding at all, resource mobilization at all. Thank you.
And first of all, I think majority of the NGOs who have lost FCRA are Christian organizations. Thousands of Christian organizations have lost it. Among these thousands of Christian organizations, 95% of them don't want to fight it also. That's also a reality. Some secular organizations like INSAF and all are fighting it with a lot of difficulty, but not getting support from even among the NGOs itself, NGO fraternity itself. That is also a reality. If they decide to fight, there is a major potential to fight because the state intervention is taking place on the NGOs, especially among the minorities. That's a point which has to be raised, apart from other legal aspects. The other thing is that the Indian state has really been successful to spread the message of fear. Now I find that NGOs are afraid to act. Don't touch this issue, don't touch that issue because we lose our FCRA. So Indian state has been very successful in spreading the message of fear. Sangh Parivar has already announced that 2024 it will be Hindu Rashtra, and several statements. And this election is the first one. Next one, after that there will be no space. It has come to that level of urgency. So you can expect a fascist kind of governance from 2024 if they succeed in their agenda. And what we can counter it is something left to ourselves. But what is happening to NGOs is only a reflection of what is happening to every sector. It is happening with the academics, it's happening with journalists. Journalists are being killed, they are being silenced, institutions are being captured. All our dissent is being suppressed in certain ways or other. And in such a context, how do NGOs behave is also a matter of question.
Because if you look at the age group sitting over here, we're all almost burnt out. Sorry for that thing. We're all, in terms of being seniors, in terms of having worked in the field of development, worked as NGOs, worked as whatever. We've all worked years, given our whole life, whether it's among the Dalits, whether it's among the Adivasis, whatever sectoral group you're working with, or we have been working. We've given our lives, we worked very hard, and now today to be sitting over here and talking about the thing, it is relevant, I'm not saying no. But then, with this talking, we get a better understanding, we get a better feeling that we are doing something. But then how much of it is going to be reflected with the communities with whom we are working, or what we want to happen? So therefore, I think at this point of time, we have gone somewhere wrong. We have not stopped. We are in a blaming game. We are in a blaming game, blaming funding agencies, their positions, their ideologies, their policies are changing, and we don't want that. We wanted to fit it in with our understanding of what we want. So that's one aspect. The other aspect I feel is we are also bound as NGOs. Registered with the Income Tax Department, registered with the FCRA division of the Home Ministry. We are also bound by certain rules and regulations which we do not want to lose because we want to continue our work. So therefore, in such a context, maybe while we continue to debate, reflect on the current socio-economic, political situation in the country, why not we do also as NGOs we also involve a little bit of introspection. Where have we gone wrong? Have we developed another group of people, the second line leadership in the organization? We are talking of NGOs, in NGOs, to take this message forward.
The basic understanding of the NGO, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and now, every decade is changing. It is changing not only by the donors, but also people also calling us. People also recognizing who are we. There are good and bad, politicians good and bad, NGOs good and bad, bureaucrats good and bad. But here, only checks and balances are coming up every day more and more to NGOs. The basic question is why? Number two, they have amended the constitution according to their whims and fancies, and they have created lot of problems to this sector only. Why? Because this is the strength of NGO. This is the major strength of the NGO. I wanted to give an example. 20 years before, when we have started Karnataka People's Forum for Land Rights in Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh People's Forum for Land Rights in Andhra, Tamil Nadu People's Forum for Land Rights in Tamil Nadu, we're all together, we are working as a South Indian Forum. Now, Tamil Nadu Land Rights Movement has been changed their name. Andhra Pradesh, they changed their name, and consultants are coming again and again, bureaucrats again and again, very good friends of mine, advising me, please change the name. You don't call it as KPFL or Karnataka People's Forum for Land Rights. You just call it as, you remove rights. Please remove rights, otherwise there will be a lot of problem for your FCRA. We cannot renew it. This is from my very close, very good bureaucrat. And he is also telling there is no other go for us not to recommend your organization. You call yourself as KPFL, Karnataka People's Forum for Land. There ends the matter. There will be no problem for you. Karnataka People's Forum for Land. Oh yes, land. Finish. Don't talk about rights. See, I'll tell you, state is dictating terms. The well-wishers within the state, they are also dictating terms. And where is the space for NGOs? Please tell me. And now, this is the right time for us to redefine, to re-articulate the very definition of what is NGO. Let us remove everyone from our heads that already we have removed long back. We came out from the myth, that is, we are not the saviors of the people. We are not the saviors of the community. Then the major mistake what we have done so far is, as Madam rightly pointed it out, the people who are sitting having 40 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years experience, but how many documentation you have done so far? How many books you have released with your own experiences? What is your experiences? Your rich experiences will be buried with you only, with us only. When I went to Roy David is having nearly 45 years of struggle experience, richest experience. But he never documented his stories. Means The history, we are not writing history, we are good talkers, but we are not a good document. Unless and until we document the history of our own, we will not create, we will not ask the people to create history and joining with us.
When we started the organization, you see, as a group of young people, there was no question of funding was there. Collecting things from the community and fighting for the community issue, and main focus was on exploitation by various stakeholders in and around the poor. There is no question of funding there by that time. Then what has happened? The movement, really the movement got its movement, and it was spread by newspaper. By that time, black and white system was there. Not that this video, this thing, that thing. When it is propagated, spread to other fields, gradually funder came. Then funder came. Do you know, we are only using aerograms to get funding. Funder came to our door. If you are doing so much good work, why do you are getting support from us? We have money. That was not in our mind. Because as Dr. Stanley said, life killing agriculture. I am rightly in that case. Last 3-4 years, we are doing watermelon cultivation after my health condition. I am a sharecropper there. Do you know, we are having watermelon for our consumption, a separate field. For your consumption, a separate field with injections. It will be sweeter than our watermelon, and it will have good size, and that we are marketing. Same thing happens to paddy. Same thing happens to any crop. Go and ask to every farmer. We have many, we are certified as certified, and we are issue-wise certified. But initially, it was not there. Whoever was working for the farmers, we are in one group. How we certified, and how the stratification, if stratified people have no communication among themselves, that the whole things like, even after all legal FCR or 12A, whatever, because of the compulsion of that by the funding agency. Do you know how many concepts we have gone through? I think I have calculated 52 concepts from PPP, SP, BSP, TSP, log frame, OIO, and we are victim of OIO. We are the victim of OIO. Oh, many concepts. There are German concepts, there are Norwegian concepts, there are Scandinavian concepts. I don't know, there are many concepts developed. Who developed that concept, who accepted that concept, who recognized that concept, and how it has stratified yours? The whole problem lies with yours. We accepted them. And we accepted the total ideology of funding agency because they had secret agenda with them. We didn't have any agenda with yours. We are simply working how to combat exploitation. At least organize the poor for their rights, forest rights, land rights, wage rights, whatever rights it may be. And we are the first, then we became the enemy of all the structures, all the stakeholders. We are fighting against the police, against the bureaucrats, against everybody else. Every moment we were in the crossroad. We are still now in the crossroad. How to avoid all these things also we will have to develop a strategy. Here I think so. This is a little contribution from my side. And I am victim. Initially, as Dr. Benjamin told, we are in a leftist ideology, where funders told us, be self-sufficient. They gave us money, we became Jamidar. We have purchased 40-45 acres of land, 60 acres of land. And some people have purchased 200, 300 acres of land. What example you can show them to the exporters? You are becoming exporter now. You are number one exploiter now. And how you will be an example for the community? Whatever the community you are working, your way of life, your feeding pattern, your mobility pattern, look for everything of your life. Our life will totally change. We are away from alienated from the mainstream of civil society. So that things I think we will have to critically intercept it is very necessary for us.
This white beard and everything that now we have to, all this jamindari we have done, enjoyed, and now we are talking about why this jamindari is there. We have, but already I have already enjoyed everything. Okay, I have got my children grown up. Okay, now I am talking about this thing. If the younger generation can speak about this.
NGOs, CSOs. Who are we? In the sense, I would say that when we usually place in analytically, we can make a distinction between economic society, the political society, and then the civil society. And the civil society is which is not overtly political, which is not engaged in purely economic activities or a business activities. If we say that as a phenomenon, we also have to understand that at any point of time, the ruling classes will definitely use the civil societies to their advantage. So what actually was happening to a certain extent is that earlier, the civil society was acting as a counterforce. I mean, from a Gramscian perspective, we can call it as a counter-hegemony. A hegemony and a counter-hegemony to address or challenge certain notions of how the state was controlling or the capital was controlling. And to that extent, I would like to say that we need not necessarily go from a defeatist perspective. See, the NGOs, what we have worked over a long period of time, there were a lot of impact which is there. The NGOs as such may not survive. See, take for example the Dalit movement. The consciousness of the Dalit movement has increased leaps and bounds. And we have also contributed. Take for example the fish workers movement. The fish workers movement has become that way, I think also because of a lot of work. Which means that we have to look critically, but we need not necessarily be defeatist. And that's something which I would like to say, that we have to be critical, but we need not be defeatist. Why we have to be critical is also because of some points that you have said. There is definitely an agenda at a global level to use NGOs to be supportive of the capital, to strengthen the whole global capitalism. So therefore, definitely it is there. Even now it is continuing there. So the necessity for us to look at what is our counter strategy. Because civil society is the terrain in which the global capital as well as the political society interact. Political society will not interact at the political level. They interact at the civil society level. The economic, the global capital also will do the same thing. Therefore, what we have to look at is actually what is the counter. What is the counter hegemonic forces that we are going to unleash or look forward to? And it will not be the same. Because the global capital actually has created a lot of other institutions to continue with the work that we have been doing. The CSR. The CSR is actually now dominating the civil society space in India.
and began with probably the social work agenda, which actually now gone into the civil society, and also increasing state funding. The state is funding, whether it is all EZD or Birth for the World or any organizations, it is the state, the corresponding state is funding them, which means that state is now coming very more. So we have to create a counter strategy. We have to create, the civil society is there, we have to create that counter strategy. And what is that? Instead of being defeatist, but being critical, we will have to look for the alternative and the challenges that we are facing.
And civil society organizations as a whole have got a historical role at different points in history. We took over the mantle of civil society organizations only after the foreign donor agencies or the World Bank, in fact the World Bank started giving us a role within a neo-colonial framework, within the structural adjustment framework. Till then we were just NGOs or voluntary organizations. Before that, most of us are actually action groups. We called ourselves action groups because we had a certain specific agenda of organizing one section of people which were not organized before. Till then, civil society organizations, we included trade unions, we included cooperatives, all those which represented, or even the Chamber of Commerce was considered as a civil society organization. So, we have to recognize why we use the term among us, especially the 40s, 50s, 60s, those who are, we're basically NGOs which found a structure in the Societies Act and Trusts Act, which said that you have 7 people have a right to form an association, free association. We thought that was the most progressive piece of legislation because that gave you the right to form any association for whatever cause it is. And from the first definition of what is an association, I think somebody mentioned, you mentioned, the way the law has evolved has put us one by one into a whole series of bandhans. The latest one is the direct taxes, indirect taxes. They also were planning a direct taxes code. And all these are not shelved and put behind the thing. They're there in the bureaucrat shelves. And they will come depending on which government comes to power. It's not that the Congress did not bring in different legislation that it's just that different bureaucrats and whatever the way they understand the various things have put up certain things which would get passed. Right? Those things which were a problem, the way the indirect taxes bill has been done, believe you me, most of your vouchers, whatever you all are going to get from peaceful societies will not be considered as expenses towards charitable objectives. So it will be non-deductible and you will be charged 30% tax. And not now, 7 years from now, because they have said for now that if you have avoided taxes, even if it's past the limitation, you have to pay. Right? So this whole crisis crossroads that we are talking is of a multiple nature. There is the donors also who are working within their framework. They have got a neo-colonial structure because in the 70s, those who ran those organizations were people from the peace movement, people from the progressive section, who were rebelling against the peace movement, who were rebelling against the system, the flower children. They were the people who decided the policies. The next portion, when they went professional, they decided that, okay, these systems have to come, and quite a lot of our people fell outside their definition. So it's nothing personal. It's the way in which society operates. So today, frankly speaking, all of us organizations are actually dinosaurs. Why? Because we have become large. We need a lot of food to eat. And we are being forced in a system where we compete with each other for the same cake. And that is what is the whole thing. And what I feel we need to examine, why is it that we have to fight for each other's cakes? whatever subtle ways, there are many subtle ways in which people work how they will get each other's cake. They come to a national meeting, but actually you are just working out your funding because it comes under certain kind. Okay? Climate change is a classic example. The way various people have many forums. But in that, everyone is trying to take a part of the cake from this agency, that agency. Whatever they are planning, suddenly we have a different group. Now, unless we are able to look back at this and say, okay, this is the reality of funding, this is CSR, this is the reality, these are government programs, unless people like us, who are dinosaurs, are able to come together and look at this critically and make suggestions for the younger generation to say that now what kind of work and what kind of things that you're going to do, this is how you're going to beat the system, or this is how you can beat the system. This meeting may not have been worth it. Because we are not, I'm glad that we are post 40 people, 40 years kind of, or 30 years, whatever plus, because we can now look back in a certain amount of equanimity. Because, okay, we have come to a last part of our involvement, we have to look at what is the next generation going to do. So I want us to feel from that point of view. We have got a few years, and our few years have got to be spent on looking at how the younger people who are forming different types of organizations, who have come, some of them have come into our organization because they want to learn, and they are quite critical of what we are doing. How we can, what kind of tools we can give. Ideological, yes, very much important, but also legal, also inter-organizational. We do not have an inter-organizational norm among us. We tried some part of it in Coimbatore experiment. We tried to say, okay, when we come together, what is that whole thing? But correctly speaking, it reached a certain stage because by and large, one type of donor was trying to say, okay, these are the ideas. We thought then, when we came for these meetings, that it may have been funded, but no, we are different. We have got our ideas clear. And actually, we did have our ideas clear. We did have a thing of comradeship. But somewhere down the line, we lost the plot. Because after 90s, each of our organizations needed more Laban's round, more room. And suddenly our salaries bill shot up because we said, no, now we must have good salaries, worth it salaries, what is this? Suddenly our salary bill went up to this much. Our transport bill went up. And then all the administrative kind of bill. You needed a communications officer, you needed somebody to write your log frames, you needed that whole system. And therefore you needed the middle class to come in, which were earlier actually vanguard. Earlier, most of the middle class which came into rural organizations were like a vanguard, like the old communist vanguard type. They had certain idealism, right? Today, we can't give our idealism to the next generation. We have to find out what is their idealism and try and ignite that.
I went back to how we started. Like Hotaji also just now said, we all started because we wanted to do something. We wanted to bring change. I had a job in Reserve Bank. When I went to village, I said, what the hell am I going to do with the job? At that time, we never knew what is NGO, what is a legal structure. We want to do something. Go to the village. Then another thing that came to my mind, 2006, John shared one video clipping with all of us in the WhatsApp group, where we are discussing the same issues then, 12 years back. I recollected also around 2000 was the time Vajpayee announced Shining India. What? Shining India, no? India Shining. India Shining. And openly said funding will not be, we don't need funding for India. NGOs don't need funding, government doesn't need funding. It was an open declaration in Europe. And many of the donor agencies at that time said, why should we continue? The country is shining. some of us tried to see the reading on the wall. Some of us tried to see what could be the various other options. Some of us said, let it go as it goes. Let's see when it comes. And somewhere, as John said, our age and the flab also started. Expenditure, the flab, our flab also increased. So the needs became more. And then we went off into a project mode and forgot our original thought. Forget self-sufficiency. We didn't even think of the people's movement or the people's organization becoming self-sufficient. In our place, we did first to some extent, but then how do you go forward? Maybe in the mid 2000s, we got lost. 2010, 5 to 10, we got lost somewhere. We didn't know where we are going, but we had projects. We were running, but the donors were clear that they are going to withdraw soon. But we say NGOs are crucibles of innovation, but somewhere that innovativeness had got lost. Somewhere those things didn't happen. In some few cases it happened, I must say. It was also, we had mushrooming of NGOs. There's a study by Priya who said that there was some, this is about 10-year back study. There's some 11 million NGOs in India. And somebody said every 400 houses there's an NGO. 400 families there's an NGO. So the study said 60% of these NGOs were fly-by-night NGOs. Maybe they are surviving well. The other 40% are doing some good work. And based on this report, Priya again organized a meeting in Bangalore. The topic was exactly this theme that we are talking about, NGOs at crossroads. So we have been talking about it. What can we do about it? What I feel is that yesterday also I was talking about passion. The passion that drives us is what should drive us. The legal frameworks will be there, and legal framework, as we get more popular, they'll put more stifle down the whole thing. As long as you are doing something which is not affecting the political class or the ruling class, no problem. They'll allow you. The moment they see a little threat, they'll put more and more. I mean, when we started, there was no FCRA, all of 40 years. FCRA came only when? 75 was just emergency. That time you had to just write, just send a report. You don't send also, no problem. Then it became formalized in 84, 85 or something. 85 it became more strict. So more and more NGOs started growing, the legal frameworks became stricter. Because when we all started, we didn't even know what is Societies Act. We did not know what is Trust Act. We found something and said, okay, this is something we can hold on to. Some framework we need, because donor needs that framework to send the money. Otherwise, we don't need that also. That's the reason we did that. And we got caught in that web. And we got caught in the strategic plannings and LFAs and everything else. And the focus started shifting from the passion from where we started. And somehow, as I said, we are not being innovative from there. Now, I can share something that we are doing. I was just sharing with John during breakfast. I don't know. Rightly, the capitalism, the capital does not allow such actions to take place because this is anti-capital. So we have been stuck within this framework, how we can put a little band-aid here and a band-aid there. That's what I see happening with the NGO sector. Because I remember in Govindpur, as I said, I'm remembering all the old. Govindpur, we spoke about islands of excellence. NGOs have become islands of excellence. I am doing fantastic work. He's my neighbor, but he's doing all bad work. But he feels he's doing very good work, but he feels mine is all bad. Then we came into networking, this. But then if you look at it, within this capitalistic framework, can we really bring about change? We are somehow stuck in this whole thing. We are doing projects, we are doing some band-aid, in a way it's again comes back to welfareism in that sense. Now what we are doing is we are trying to see, is there any experiments we can come up with which can challenge this whole mode of production, the capitalistic way of doing things. How can that be? Now, for example, through social business as a tool for transformation, we are looking at. Because revolution and all, we had dreams. That's 40-year-old dreams. We know now we are too old to bring about that revolution. But what are the alternatives that we can try to see? I see Timbuktu, for example. I see an alternative. Vikram Sangam also is trying various alternatives. All these things, how can we bring in? And somewhere I think donors, we may not get them back the way they were. I think that we have to be realistic and being naked and honest about it.
What is the last sentence?
The donors may not come back, will not come back as they were in the earlier stages. That in whatever way we try to influence them, or I don't think that will happen. Because 2004 only, that's why I brought up the Shining India example. Then itself they wanted to quit India. And we had a small, we had a small group which was lobbying with them saying that no, see, that's when we coined the word India and Bharat. Of course, in India also there's poverty. Chennai, you can tell the word. But we had to do a lot of lobbying. But today what has happened in the donor circle is that they have become technocrats. They are only technocrats who are only interested in it. If your report has reached, they'll tick mark. The report has not reached, a reminder letter to be sent. That's it. They have no idea of development concepts or whatever, whether you call it rights or don't call it rights, they have no idea. It's only technical. And now more and more, these technocrats are getting fed up, especially of the older generation, because they are not able to talk to you. Shailesh Da, he's a very big Dada in India. How can I talk to him? Close up his project. So, that's the reality. I'm telling you. I'm sharing it. A friend of mine did a PhD on this topic, and this is exactly what he found out. They found out that he found files in desks which they're going to close because they cannot handle or discuss in that level of frameworks. So it's reached that stage. It's become a technocracy. So funding, I always think we must look at last. Let us think of what are the ideas, what do we want to do? Transformation, to change the whole thing of what the whole society is, to transform. What are the ideas, what is the passion? Funding, I feel, will come. It's something when we started, we didn't have funding. I mean, we also didn't have funding for 3-4 years. And once they saw that you're doing some relevant work, they came and spoiled us. That's also there.